Welcome to our third Inventor tutorial. Today we're going to focus a lot on the Revolve tool and how it can make really complicated looking designs very simply. We're going to use the arc tool today, and we're going to make a pawn from the game of chess as well as a checkers piece. And then eventually we'll get to making a fidget. This will allow us to talk about how to use the Filet tool, make construction lines, and we're going to use our first constraint, the perpendicular constraint. To get started, I'm going to start by making a new file. I want a standard part, and I'm going to click Create. Going to my tools, I'm going to click Document Settings, and I'm going to ensure that my units are set to millimeters. Clicking Apply and Close. I'm going to go over to my 3D Model tab and click Start 2D Sketch. I'm going to click a plane. As before, the plane doesn't matter, but later on you might decide that it does, and you will be more careful about which plane you start drawing on. I'm going to start by drawing a line. The line tool is super nice, and this will allow me to define how big I want my chess piece to be. I think I want it to be 25 millimeters tall, which is really close to 1 inch. I can type that in and hit enter. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Now that I'm done with my line tool, I'm going to hit the escape key. You could have drawn your line on this axis coming off of the origin, but to make it more clear for video, I have moved it over a little bit. It won't affect the final product. Next up, I'm going to draw the base of the pawn. I'm going to use the rectangle tool for that. I'm going to make sure that my rectangle tool is snapped onto the bottom of the line, and then I'm going to drag it across. I want the bottom of my pawn to be about 5 millimeters tall. So that's what's selected first. I'm going to type 5. And then for how far to extend it, I'm going to extend it 10 millimeters. And then press enter to save my choice. I'm going to use the arc tool next. The arc tool is found between the circle and the square tool. The arc tool requires 3 clicks to place an arc. The first 2 clicks place its endpoint, and the third click defines how strong or how weak the arc is. An arc is a partial circle. I'll demonstrate over here. 1 click, 2 click are my endpoints, and when I move my mouse, I'm now setting how far is my circle. How far away from the center point of it, or its radius. I'm gonna hit the escape key because I don't want it there. I want my arc to be coming off the base and moving up towards the top of my pawn. I can wiggle my mouse till I get a pleasing looking arc. That looks pretty good to me. The last piece of my chess piece that I want to add is the top, and those are usually round. So I'm going to grab my circle tool. I'm going to click on the line, and I'm going to extend out my circle till I like the way that it looks. Notice I've only drawn half of a pawn, and I'm going to increase that by trimming away things I don't need. If I trim away the circle right now, I'm going to actually get rid of way more of it than I want. That's because the head of the pawn and the first line I draw, the line doesn't go all the way to the top, so I'm going to extend that out. There we go. It can be extra long and it won't be a problem. Now I can use the trim tool and trim away some of the excess. With only half of a pawn here, I'm now ready to revolve it. Instead of clicking extrude, I'm going to click revolve. Sometimes this will automatically select the shape you've made, sometimes it won't. If it's not glowing blue, come over here and click the select profiles and then click the profile that you would like to revolve. The next click you need to do is to select axes. So come over here and say that you would like to select your axis, and then click on that first line we made, that vertical line going up our half of a pawn. When I click that, we'll get a preview of what our pawn's going to look like. That looks pretty cool. Fun thing to check out is that you can make a partial pawn. If you click this drag to resolve profile gray arrow, it'll turn orange, and then you can drag it and make a partial pawn. I think it'd be really fun someday to make a chess piece where you only have about 3/4 of every piece. But that's silly, so I'm going to click under angle A, the full, and then OK. That's all it takes to make a chess piece. We add more details, such as more rings. We can make it look even cooler and then make maybe like a rook or a bishop or any of the other pieces. One thing that's bothering me though, before we move on to our next piece, is this ring around the end. That looks a little sharp. So I'm going to come up to the Fillet tool, click Fillet, and then I'm going to click that ring. And you can see that it draws a rounded over version of it. I can adjust that by either clicking and dragging the arrow or typing in my number. I like the look of a fillet with a size of 1. That looks pretty good. Let's move on to our next piece. Making our next piece, I'm going to click File, New, and create a standard project. I'm going to ensure that I'm editing using millimeters by going to Document Settings, Units, and changing my length to millimeter. The next piece we're going to design is a checkers piece. And checkers pieces look a bit like this, where they will sometimes have some little waves on the top, and they'll be round but fairly short. I'm going to start my sketch by clicking Start 2D Sketch and choosing my plane. I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw one out that is 12 millimeters tall by 15 millimeters wide. Looks a little square. I'm going to adjust my 12. I'm going to hit the escape key to leave the rectangle tool and double click my 12 and change it to 6. Remember, this is going to be doubled to the other side as it's revolved around. That's looking pretty good. The next thing I want to do is I want to make those bumps. If I use the circle tool on the top, these bumps are really aggressive when they get revolved around and don't look that great. Instead, I would like to have my bumps below and just stick up a little bit. But getting that to be even could be a little tricky, and I might not get them all just the way I want them. This is a great opportunity to show you how we can make a construction line. I'm going to first click the line tool, and then over here I'm going to click what looks like a red line with another red line hitting it. This, if you hover over it, says construction. Once I'm in the construction line, when I draw my line, I'm going to draw a nice sloppy one across there, you'll notice that it makes a dotted line. This is a line that you can't extrude, but you can place things on. It's super handy. I want this line to be perfectly at a 90-degree angle to this side or parallel to this top edge. And this is something that I can do using the constraints. Up here, we have a number of constraints that we've not used until now. I'm going to use the perpendicular constraint, which looks like a red line with a black line coming off of it at a 90-degree angle. Once I click perpendicular constraint, the first click selects the line that I want to reference, and the second line is the one that I want to snap into place. When I click this, notice how that line moved and became perfectly parallel with the top and the bottom, or perpendicular to the side. I want this to be closer to the top than the bottom, so I'm going to use my dimension tool. I'm going to set a dimension of 2 millimeters. That's moved it up a lot closer to the top. I'm then going to use my circle tool and draw a few circles so that they stick out. You might have noticed that these circles all have dotted lines. That's because I made a mistake and did not turn off the construction line tool. To fix that is no big deal. I'm going to use the escape key to leave the circle tool, and then I'm going to click the circle that I want to change. Once it's highlighted, I can come up and click the constraint, and it will lose its dotted line. Repeating to the others, and we're most of the way there. We can change this distance constraint. If I want to, I might try 1.5, and notice that the circles follow that construction line. This can allow me to fine-tune the look that I want. I'm going to use the trim tool to get rid of a few bits of these circles that I don't need. And then finish sketch. It's now time to use the Revolve tool. When I click the Revolve tool, this time it did not automatically select my profile to revolve around. So I'll select that first by clicking the drawing that I just drew. Then it's time to select my axis. I'm going to click select axis, and I'm going to select one of the two sides. When I click that, we'll see that it drags that all the way around, and we are left with a really nice looking checkers piece. And up until this point, we have made some really cool things in 3D design. Up until this point, we've not made anything that moves. And so a little bit more careful design consideration needs to go into how we make it. I'm going to make a new part. I'm going to ensure that my document settings have my units set to millimeter. And then I'm going to start my first 2D sketch. To help me out here, I'm going to use a rectangle tool. And this rectangle tool is going to kind of be the box that I'm building into. I want it to be 10 millimeters tall and about 30 millimeters across. We're not going to end up using that full width, and we're going to get rid of a lot of this box, but that's okay. The next thing we're going to use is we're going to use the circle tool. And we're going to try to find the middle of that first line, the horizontal left side. I'm going to move it up and down until I get that green mark, which says I am now centered. I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag it out. I want my first circle to have a diameter of 15 millimeters. And then press enter. The circle that falls after that will have the same center point, but it's going to have a diameter of 16 millimeters. This is important because this inside bit of this square and this outside bit of the square are going to move against each other. So there has to be a little bit of a gap between them. But that gap can't be so big that it's able to fall apart. I'm going to use this line tool simply to demonstrate that this inner curve is too big to fit past this outer curve, because if it would be not touching this line or passing through this line. Getting rid of that line now. I'm going to continue to use the circle tool. I'm going to make a few more rings. I want each ring that's solid, not the spacer rings, the solid rings to be 5 millimeters thick. But I want the spaces in between them to be 1 millimeter thick. I need to add 5 to 16. I get 21, and I can press enter. The next circle, starting at the same center point, will be one more than that, or 22. I want one more final ring. And so that means I need 22 plus 5 for my center point of the circle, and that's going to be 27. That's all I need to do except trim and clean it up. Grabbing my trim tool, I'm going to click the bits of the circle that are not inside of that first square I drew. I also need to trim out in between the sections of the circles that I want to keep. Gonna get rid of the extra box, at least the parts of it that it will let me. If I get rid of this line here, I got a warning saying that this constraint would be deleted. That line can stay over there, I don't mind it. I want to get rid of these 1 millimeter sections of box. And then I'm going to zoom out again. This looks really complicated, but it was made with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circles and a rectangle. I'm ready to hit Finish Sketch. As we've done before, I'm going to use the Revolve tool. And this time, again, this is too complicated of a drawing for it to automatically know what I want it to look like. So I'm going to select the profiles that I have drawn using the circles. And then my axis will be that farthest left edge of my box. Here we can see what it's going to look like. I'm going to print this out real quick and make sure that it works. Alright, in conclusion, we have learned a lot about how we can use the Revolve tool to make really interesting shapes. We have made a pawn, a checkers piece, and an interesting fidget.